Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today we are going to be tier ranking all of the 2020 releases I have read this year. So I have never done a tier ranking video before. I believe that they are quite popular, but I wanted to make a video where I talk about the best and the worst, in my opinion of course, of 2020 releases that I have read throughout the year. Now the problem with that is I have actually read 24 2020 releases, so for me to put that in one video, like standard video where I talk about every single one, what they're about, what my thoughts on each book is, that would be a really long video, and to split it up into multiple videos just for 2020 releases seemed a little bit extra, a little bit gratuitous, so I decided instead that I would do a tier ranking video. So just a couple of little stats for you guys, because in my spreadsheet I do track what year the books I'm reading are released in. However, I do not track that into a graph, so you won't find any of that information in my stats video that will come at the beginning of 2021. But in 2020 I read 24 2020 releases in total, which is an increase on 2019 when I only read 13 2019 releases. Now this year 24 books is representing less than a quarter of the books that I've read throughout the year, so I would say that new releases are a substantial amount of the books I'm reading. However, they are definitely not dominant, and I am still mainly reading backlist titles, which is good. I prefer to read backlist titles because there are a lot of books that I don't get to that I think I would really enjoy. So let us get started, starting off with the tiers we're going to be using today. Now we do have 5 tiers, and you would think that maybe this video isn't going to add anything new because there are 5 tiers. There are 5 stars in the rating system, so it does seem like I would take a 3-star book and put it into the middle tier. However, in this video we are basically just going off personal enjoyment, so it isn't going to be about like how well written the book is. It is just like how much I enjoyed it in comparison to other 2020 releases. So the bottom tier that we have is Burning My Eyeballs Would Have Been More Enjoyable. As you can imagine, this tier is for books that I now consider wasted my time, so books that I wish I had actually never read. Next here we have Forgettable, so it could be an okay book, like a book that was alright, it's decent, but it just didn't stick with me. I just don't care about it all that much anymore. The middle tier is just good, and I was thinking of a way to phrase this, but I decided to go just with good. So this means that the book was literally just good. It was an alright book, while I acknowledge that it had a lot of positive attributes. For me personally, like, it wasn't a favourite, there was just something about it that didn't gel with me. Next to the top we have Need a Sequel Like Yesterday. So I really enjoyed this book to the point where I want more. Like, I really loved it, thought it was great, would read any sequels if it is a series, but it's not like my new top favourite. And then the top tier is Obsessed, so new favourites, books that I've read that I absolutely adore and that I would maybe return to over and over again, or that have now taken a place amongst my favourite books of all time. So getting straight into it, we are just going in the order that these have been imported, which I think is actually roughly alphabetical order, starting with Addie LaRue. Now this was a book released by V. Schwab. V. Schwab is a very hit or miss author with me. Addie LaRue was an adult release about a girl who makes a deal with the devil to live forever. I adored this. I gave it 5 stars. It's my favourite V. Schwab book, and I have read 6 now, and I am around 50-ish pages away from finishing a 7th. Addie LaRue just blew them out of the water for me. Very romantic story, very sad, very dramatic, very atmospheric, and I am actually going to be putting this into the Obsessed tier because this is going to be on my favorite books of the year. I was just blown away. It just really feeds into the melodramatic side of me that likes really sad, dramatic, like atmospheric stories. And next up we have All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. This was an Owlcrate book. It came up in Bookopoly, which was the reason that I read it. It's a young adult fantasy. I remember that it has lots of island kingdoms, and the princess has a type of magic that isn't desirable amongst the people. Like, she's doing a magical demonstration so that she can be the next heir to the kingdom. Something goes terribly wrong, and then she has to go on a journey with a pirate to reclaim her kingdom or her island. Some of the plot twists were pretty cool in there. I liked the plot twists, but as you can tell from that synopsis, I remember absolutely nothing about it. So that is 100% going into the forgettable category, and I will not be reading the sequel. when that is released, which I think is actually very soon. Next up we have Aurora Burning by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is the second book in the Aurora cycle. It is a young adult science fiction series about kind of a ragtag group of misfit space cadets. They end up with this girl on board who has been rescued from the wreckage of a 100 or 200-year-old spaceship, and for some reason people don't want her around, and they end up on this wild mission, like evading the authorities and lots of other people who are coming for them, to do something with this girl, like help her achieve her purpose, even though she doesn't actually know what her purpose is. This installment was wild. It was really fast paced. While this is not my usual kind of favorite book, I did give this 5 stars, but it's not my usual in that it is super fast paced, it's super fun, but I really like the characters. They're quirky, there's a lot of banter. It is typical J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman character work in this really fun, fast paced sci-fi setting. I wouldn't say that this is one of my favorites, and I do think that I prefer the Illuminate files over the Aurora cycle so far. However, the twists, one of them really annoyed me, but the twists were just so wild, and the way that this ended, I am 100% putting this into need a sequel like yesterday. Bone Cryer's Moon by Catherine Purdy, one of my most anticipated releases of the year. It has a cover illustrated by Charlie Bowater, who is one of my favorite book artists from when she was doing fan art up until now, where she is now illustrating covers. This is a young adult fantasy romance. I got this in an Owlcrate. It is the story of a girl who is a bone crier, and she doesn't want to be a bone crier because you have to sacrifice animals to harness their powers, and then you have to play a flute on a bridge to summon your true love, who you then have to kill to become a full bone crier. And she's not about this life, and something goes wrong when her best friend is going through this ritual, and she ends up having to kind of go through a lot of personal growth to save her friend. This was one of my most disappointing books of the year. I just really was not into it. It was very fast paced. I felt like there was a lot of conveniences and things that didn't really, not necessarily make sense. They were just like really weak plot twists that you could see a million miles come in, and for some reason the writing didn't gel with me, so sadly I am going to be going with Forgettable for this one. Okay, so next up we have Burn by Patrick Ness. This was an arc I received. I believe that it is set in the 60s, and this is like kind of an alternate world where dragons are used as like workers, and her family hire a dragon to work the fields. You know what, actually straight up putting this into Forgettable because I don't remember anything about it. I remember when I finished it I thought it was alright, but it definitely wasn't my type of story, and now I don't remember much about what was going on there. I do remember though actually that I felt like it built up to a crescendo midway through the book and then kind of reset, and it felt like you were going through the book again, and it just felt a little bit tedious, so I do think Forgettable is the right place for Burn. Next up we have Charlie Travesty by KJ Sutton and Jesse Elliott. We will have 2 more KJ Sutton books on this video as well. I may do them all now actually, but Charlie Travesty was a 4-part serial that was released in summer. I did read and rate them all separately. For the purpose of this video I have put them all together in the binder, but Charlie Travesty is a new adult vampire romance series. It follows a girl who is a vampire princess, and in this world the colour of your eyes denote which sector of the city you're going to live in. Now when the main character Charlotte gets to this day where she will go to sleep and wake up and her eyes will have changed colour, when she wakes up her eyes are a different colour than anybody expected, and this sets off like a whole chain of events. I really enjoyed this book for the things I'm familiar with from KJ Sutton, also known as Kelsey, who is a good friend of mine. There were epic plot twists, angsty romances, more than one love interest, lots of drama, hot vampires, things like that I did really enjoy. However, it just didn't hit me quite on an emotional level, and I don't know whether that is because I read it in its installments of like around 100 pages each. So I think in terms of tier ranking, I am going to put this in to good because I did very much enjoy it. I am going to be reading the sequels to this when they are released, and I think it has so much potential and it's going to go in so many amazing places. I also think it has the potential to hook me further down the line in this series. This full installment, while I thoroughly enjoyed it and I especially love the character of Noah, it isn't one of my favorites of the year. So if we're going to do the rest of KJ Sutton, we have Restless Slumber and Deadly Dreams on here. Restless Slumber was released early on in the year. Deadly Dreams has just been released and I have just read it. Both of them were 5-star reads for me. These are the second and third books in the Fortuna Swan series, which is a dark fairy romance series that is very compelling and has characters that I love. And each installment of this book I am just so emotionally invested in. So I haven't yet decided which book is my favorite in the series. Deadly Dreams was very sad. It just had like a whole bleak atmosphere through it. Some really upsetting plot twists in there that really like pulled me in the heartstrings. But I do think that in terms of everything I've read from Kelsey so far, in terms of writing and story construction, is definitely her strongest book. Whereas Restless Slumber, I thoroughly enjoyed it, gave it 5 stars, absolutely adored it, loved it so much, especially the plot twist in there, which was wild. But in terms of the plot, my one criticism of it is that I feel like it had more element than it needed. It would have maybe been a stronger book if one of those things was not present in the story. So I think what I'm gonna do for these is Restless Slumber I'm going to go in with Obsessed, because I read Fortuna Swan and Restless Slumber back to back and adored them. And then I've just read Deadly Dreams, and because of the nature of Kelsey's writing, with it being so compelling with so many plot twists, I'm going to put Deadly Dreams in Need a Sequel Like Yesterday, because yes, I need a sequel like yesterday. Next up we have Court of Miracles by Kester Grant. I had an arc of this on NetGalley. I also received it in an Illumicrate, and this is a Les Miserables retelling from the perspective of Eponine. So in this book, Eponine's sister has been taken to the House of Flesh, which is essentially a prostitution ring. All of the underground, there's like a criminal underground of this city that is split into guilds, and Eponine joins the Thieves Guild so that she cannot be sold by her father into the House of Flesh like her sister was, but also that she can eventually get her sister back. One of the ways that Eponine plans to do this is by growing close to Cassette and eventually trading her for her sister. However, she does begin to grow close to Cassette and so it gives up on that. So I really liked the world in here. I loved the guilds, and I really hope that we get to see more of those in the sequel. In terms of the plot, it was like real fast paced, so like every few chapters Eponine would accomplish an impossible task, and it would be this build up where nobody has ever achieved this thing before, and then Eponine would do it in a chapter, and I just felt like a lot of things were very inconsequential like that. That being said, I did thoroughly enjoy it. I will be reading the sequel to this. I don't know why I loved it so much. I do think it was mainly the world, because the characters, they were good and I enjoyed their interactions on the page, but they were nothing like overwhelming to me. So I'm unsure about this one, but I think we're gonna put it in good, because while I am going to read the sequel, I will buy and read the sequel, I don't think it's going to be one that I'm itching to pick up as soon as it arrives on my doorstep. Next up we have The Dawn Chorus by Samantha Shannon. This is going to be a really hard one for me to place, because this is a 3.5 novella in the Bone Season series. We all thought we were going to get the 4th book in the series, which is The Mask Falling, this year. Sadly not. The release on that has been pushed back to early next year. I do have an arc of it. I haven't started it yet, but instead of that we ended up with this like 100-page novella, which is just about 2 of the main characters dealing with the repercussions of the 3rd book specifically, but also just everything that kind of led up to that, because it is a lot. There was a strong focus on mental health in this, but I'm not a huge fan of novellas, and I do enjoy reading them when I'm currently in the series. So if I'm really enjoying a series, I will pick up a novella where it's supposed to go and then dive into the next book. But I think because this was just a novella that like I read in a weird floating period, a few months after I'd reread the 3rd book and before I even had the arc of the 4th book, it was okay. I gave it 4 stars. I think it was good, but it was 90 pages, so nothing really stood out to me. So I actually think I'm going to put this into forgettable, which hurts, but I do think if I had done this, maybe if I'd have read it directly in between the 2 books it goes in between and just carried on through the series, I think it would have got a higher place. It definitely has clues to book 4, but I haven't managed to tie that together yet because I haven't read book 4. So I think if I did this at a later date when I'd already read book 4, it may get a higher ranking, but at the minute I'm afraid it's in forgettable. Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This is a weird one because I hated and adored this book in equal measure. It is a young adult fantasy about this girl who goes to a magic school. The magic school is trying to kill her. There's no teachers. There's monsters in this world and the school is warded against monsters. However, for you to be able to graduate, you have to fight your way out through a hall full of these monsters that are trying to eat you. So the main character is trying to secure an alliance. However, however she is extremely standoffish and very defensive. I hated the writing style in this. I hated the endless exposition, how it would take you out of a scene and just go on an info dump about something that happened 300 years ago, so that by the time you came back to the narrative you had no idea what was going on. But I adored the main character and I resonated with her so much, and I liked the character dynamics. I liked the concept of the world and the magic school, and I am desperate for the sequel. So while I could not in good conscience give this anything higher than 3 stars because of how much I detested the writing style, I think today I'm actually going to put this in need a sequel like yesterday, because what can I say? I thoroughly enjoyed it even while I hated it at the same time. Next up we have From Blood and Ash by, oh my god, who is it? From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, of course. I have very recently read this. It's one of the last books I read and I made a whole non-spoiler vlog on it. So this is a new adult high fantasy romance that follows a girl who is a maiden. She's been chosen by the gods and she will ascend at some point. I think it's her 19th birthday, but until that point she's never to be seen, never to be touched. She's not allowed to talk to people, and the love interest in here is a man called Hawk who has been assigned to guard her up until the point of her ascension. There's a lot of mystery and ambiguity surrounding these supernatural creatures in this world. The beginning of it I thought was quite mediocre, both in the writing and the fantasy elements, but I adore Hawk and the way he is presented and the romance in here, and by the end I was just along for the ride and I loved absolutely every element of this book. So I am going to put this into need a sequel like yesterday, because the second I finish this book I ordered the sequel. It is right there staring at me, and I'm just waiting for Kelsey, who I buddy read this with, to get her copy of Kingdom of Flesh and Fire so that I can continue. Next up we have Escape from Aurora. This is the second installment in the Frostheart series, which is Gavin from How to Train Your Gavin's favourite series of all time. I read Frostheart for Believathon, which is a month-long middle grade readathon, last year. This year I read the sequel. It follows a boy called Ash who lives in this snowy landscape that is plagued with monsters, and he is a song weaver, which means that he can sing and the monsters actually respond to this. It's a way of communicating with monsters. Because of this, his community casts him out because they think that the monsters are going to brainwash him, and he ends up on board the Frostheart, which is a pathfinding sleigh, and he embarks upon a mission to find his parents who went on a pathfinding mission many years ago and never returned, and he would like to know what happened to them. So I really enjoy this series. It's not my favourite middle grade, but it had a couple of emotional moments in Escape from Aurora particularly. I nearly cried at 2 points. I love the illustrations. I think Ash is adorable. My favourite character is Tobu because we always stand a father figure, but I feel like there is a disconnect between me and this book, and I do think that it is because it is a little bit fast paced. There are quite a lot of action scenes in here. It's just generally not my favourite type of storytelling, but the cuteness of the characters, the illustrations, the just heartwarming nature of this does pull it back around for me. And based on this book in particular and how it ended on not necessarily a cliffhanger, but this big like revelationary moment, I'm actually going to put this in need a sequel like yesterday, because I just need to know how that last scene is going to play out at the beginning of the next book. Next up we have Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. This is a webcomic, and then every year part of the webcomic is bound up into a graphic novel form. It is a very simple story. It is a contemporary romance between 2 teenage boys. One of them is openly gay, the other one thinks he might be bi, and it is their relationship. It is just sweet. They are lovely and supportive and beautiful and wonderful together, and it's one of those things that like I don't like just standard young adult contemporaries without like a little bit of angst or drama or dealing with hard-hitting topics, but this is just so heartwarming and cute. I do adore it. It just makes me feel good, but I'm not like desperate to continue. It is like a series that I read just to make me feel good. It doesn't have epic plot twists that make you want to continue reading. It's just nice. So for that reason I'm going to put this in the good section, even though I think I gave this volume like 4 or 5 stars. I really love this series. Next up we have Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. Now this is my favourite middle grade series of all time. This transcends being my favourite middle grade of all time to being one of my favourite series of all time. This follows a young girl called Morrigan Crow who is a cursed child, and she is destined to die on her 12th birthday. However, a man called Jupiter North comes and swoops her away, takes her to the magical city of Nevermore, where he enters her into a series of trials to become a member of the Wondrous Society. And it is just everything. The world building in here, the characters, just the story, the atmosphere. I absolutely adore this. It is one of the most imaginative and just wonderful worlds that I have ever had the pleasure of reading about, and I am going to put this into obsessed because I've read all of the books in this series this year, and I love it so much. I could read it forever. It's beautiful. And next up we have House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. When I read this, it was one of the first books I read this year. I said, this is my new favorite book of all time. It's probably going to be my favorite book of the year. Spoiler alert, it still is, but nobody's surprised. So this is Sarah J Maas's first adult book. It is an adult fantasy romance. We're following a half-fae woman called Bryce. She has been summoned by the Archangel, who's kind of like, I guess, the president, to investigate a string of murders because he believes that she has the skill set and the connections to actually get to the bottom of this string of murders that they'd previously thought that they'd solved. Love it. I have tons of videos on Crescent City. I have spoiler-free videos, spoiler videos. I have a guide to Sarah J Maas if you've never read a book by her before, and I also have a music video. I am obsessed, and so we are going into the obsessed tier. Next up we have Infinity Son by Adam Silvera. This is I could be my only 1-star read of the year. This is like a superhero story set in New York. It's a contemporary fantasy. There are 2 different factions of superheroes, but one of them is like not good, and it follows 2 brothers, one that is as bland as bread and the other one who's just a fucking obnoxious idiot. I was gonna say something worse than idiot, but I stopped myself. Anyway, it was a pile of shit, and I would rather have burned my eyeballs than read this book. I'm so mad that I read it. Just Like You by Nick Hornby. I read this because I was invited to take part in an episode of the BookTube series, which is a YouTube original series where they have booktubers come and sit in conversation with an author. They did an episode in the UK. I don't think I've actually spoke about this on my channel yet, but they did an episode in the UK a couple of months ago. I went to London, and that is what this is for. I interviewed Nick Hornby about his new release, Just Like You. So this follows a couple, and they are pretty much opposites in every way. He is black, she is white. She is middle class, he is working class. She's in her 40s, he's in his 20s, and it is about how they have this attraction, but everything is against them. They are at 2 very different places in their lives, and they just don't have a lot in common at all, and whether they can make it work, whether they can find common ground in this sea of differences between them. I enjoyed it. I feel like it has a very realist tone to it, which I don't like in a romance, because it is a contemporary story that features things like Brexit. It talks about racism, classism, things like that, but it is about a romance between these 2 people, and I felt like they got so hung up on the differences and why they couldn't work that they lost sight of the fact that they like each other and they wanted to be together, and that they could try and make it work at least, instead of saying all of the things that were going wrong. So I think for this one I'm going to go with Forgettable, because I did really enjoy it, but then at the same time it's not my genre either. Like standard contemporary, like adult contemporary, isn't my usual thing. Then we have Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerry Maniscalco. I had an arc of this on NetGalley. It is about twin sisters. One of them is murdered and the other one dabbles in dark magic to try and find out who killed her and seek revenge, and while she's doing this she summons a prince of hell called Wrath. So the first 40% of this I didn't like. It was going very much in the same vein as Bone Crier's Moon, and I was so disappointed. However, the last 60% I really thoroughly enjoyed, and this also ends on a cliffhanger, or like it kind of took a turn, and I just was confused and didn't understand what was happening, and I need to know what's going to happen. I really love the setting of this, really love the atmosphere, really loved Wrath. I do like Amelia, although not through the beginning. Like the beginning just had a lot of things that I just didn't like, but I'm very excited to see where this is going to go. So I think I'm going to put this into need a sequel like yesterday, because I think, like A Court of Miracles, I'm not necessarily desperate to pick up the sequel, but I do think it is going to make its way onto my priority list when the sequel is released. Then we have My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is told in 2 timelines from the perspective of a girl in her 30s and also when she's a teenager. A woman has come out and said that her teacher has abused her when she was in school as a teenager, and she's reaching out to the main character to try and get her to speak out as well, because they were abused abused by the same man. However, the woman does not consider herself to have been abused. She sees her relationship as a romance, and she does recognize elements of abuse, but also at the same time doesn't think she was abused. And we switch between this current day timeline and the past when the abuse was actually happening. So this was a very uncomfortable read. It was very uncomfortable, and it was graphic in things like the sex scenes. I liked it a lot, but I can't say I enjoyed it because it was pretty grim. Like, it made me real uncomfortable, and but that was the point of it, so can't really fault it on that. Really enjoyed it. But would I want to read any more from this? It's not a new favorite. I'm not obsessed with it. Would I ever want to read any more of this? I mean, saying that, I do like I gravitate towards books like this with really dark topics, so yes, I am definitely going to be reading more like this. However, from that particular story, I have had enough. So it's going into the good section. Really loved it, but it's like a standalone adult thriller slash contemporary. Not writing home about it or anything, but it was really good and I'm glad that I read it. The Raven and the Dove by, who is this by? Caitlin Davis, I think, maybe. I had an arc on NetGalley because it was a fantasy romance. It's set in this like air kingdom, sky kingdom, where there's loads of islands, and every like generation, or when a certain person reaches a certain age, all of the teenagers, kids of the royals come together to have a series of competitions to pick who they're going to be with, like to pick their mating pairs kind of things. And essentially the main plot is that the Raven Prince has a disability, and because of that he puts his brother forward, who is a bastard, to compete in the trials for him because the Raven Kingdom is failing and they need to do well in these trials to secure a good heir to try and save their kingdom. And the prince doesn't feel like he can do this because of his disability. He thinks his brother would be much better at the practical challenges, and the Dove Princess ends up falling in love with him, only to find out that he's not actually the Raven heir. It is his brother. I didn't like this book. I gave it 2 stars. I thought that it was way too long. It had too many perspectives. Didn't really understand the point. Because of all the perspectives, the romance felt rushed, so I didn't believe it. I didn't care. It's a Tristan and Isolde retelling as well, so it's supposed to be real dramatic and tragic. But yeah, I wasn't a fan. I would actually say Burning My Eyeballs would have been more enjoyable than reading this because it was just so tedious and I wanted it to be over from like page 200 and it was like 500 pages long. So the last 3 we have are all arcs that were sent to me. The first one is The Mermaid the Witch in the Sea by Maggie Takuda Hall. This book follows a queer pirate on board this pirate ship, and how the pirate ship operates is that it masquerades as a passenger ship. It takes on rich passengers, and then when they got so far into their journey they reveal themselves to be pirates. So Florian is a pirate on the ship and they start to become acquainted with a highborn lady on this ship, and they start to grow close, and together they hatch a plan to free a captured mermaid. Honestly, read this not too long ago and I don't remember a whole ton about it. I do remember that I did really enjoy the writing style in here. I thought that it was very reminiscent of things like folk tales and fairy tales, and that it felt like a timeless story that had a nice set of morals to deliver to the reader, but also provided this beautiful fantasy story with a little bit of romance in it. However, it just really wasn't my thing, so while I do acknowledge that it's good, I think a lot of people would really enjoy this and love it and it would be their favorite book. Just based on my personal taste, it's not something that is gonna stick with me, and clearly because I've already forgotten a lot of it. So sadly, while I did enjoy this, it is going in the forgettable pile. Next up we have 3/5 by John Bircher. This is an adult thriller that follows a man called Bobby. Bobby is mixed race, he's half black, however he does not tell anybody that he's half black because he is white passing. This book is set on the background of the LA riots and the O.J. Simpson trial, and as well as that, Bobby's best friend has just been released from prison and he is a newly converted white supremacist. So this has a lot about race in it, it has a lot about identity. I really enjoyed this book and I thought that it was very powerful, and I'm glad that I read it because of some of the messages that it puts forward. My one kind of flaw with it is that I enjoyed the perspectives of other characters as opposed to Bobby, because you also get the perspective of a doctor in here as well as his mum, and I was really interested in their perspectives over his, but I really enjoyed it. I didn't like the end. The end upset me a bit, but I thought it was a good book. However, not really my thing, not something I'm ever gonna reread. I've passed this on to another reviewer now as well, so it's just gonna go in good. And finally we have When Life Gives You Mangoes by Gaston. This is a children's story about a girl who lives on an island called Sycamore, which I believe is in Jamaica, and she has the best time on this island. Like, she plays make-believe with her friends. She really likes her home and her community essentially, and it is about summer days and kid stuff like falling out with your best friend and being able to sense tension amongst the adults but not really know what's going on there. I really enjoyed this. Once again, I kind of enjoyed the background themes and what was going on with the adults as opposed to the main character. My problem that I have with this is that from the setup of the plot, I had a very good idea of how it was going to end, and I was absolutely correct. So one of the big things in here is that the girl has fallen out with her best friend because her friend keeps taunting her about last summer, which the main character has completely forgotten about. Now, that is the synopsis of a very popular young adult book that I have read that has a plot twist, which is the reason why not everybody loves the book, but everybody knows about the book. And so I had a good feeling about the plot twist in When Life Gives You Mangoes, and I was right. So yeah, it was a little bit underwhelming in that aspect, but I do think that Gaston still managed to deliver this plot twist in a way that was still surprising to me. I did enjoy it, but it was a children's contemporary, so children's books and contemporary, neither of them are things that I actively reach for. So in terms of ranking, this is going to be going into the good section. I enjoyed it, but it's just not really my thing, is it? So there we have the final tier. I think we did pretty well. We had 2 with the burning eyeballs, and then 6 in each of the Forgettable, Good and Needed series like yesterday, which I'm really surprised about, and 4 in the Obsessed column. So I think overall, for how I felt about 2020 releases, it is a mixed bag. I made a video not long ago about how I feel about young adult now and how I shouldn't really be reading new releases because of the things that I enjoy as a reader, but considering I was feeling kind of meh about a lot of books that I'm reading where only the first book is out, so I can't read the second one directly afterwards, I think this is a pretty good spread because we have 10 books that are up there, which is nearly half of all of them, in the best tiers, and then 6 in the good tier, and then there's only 8 books that are in the more negative ones. So there you have it. Those are my 2020 releases that I have read tier ranked. Please let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these books, what you guys thought of them. Please also let me know, I guess, if you would like any more tier ranking videos from me. I never thought I would really make a tier ranking video, to be honest. They're not my favorite things to watch. However, I felt like this was one of the best ways to deliver the information I wanted to about these books, and also it gave me the opportunity as well, because I didn't know where these were going to fall before I filmed this video, so it gave me the opportunity to actually see in a visual manner, I guess, my opinions on all of the 2020 releases I read in 2020. But that is about it for this video, guys, so please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you will find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. That's it from me today, guys. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.